Conscious of its spiritual and moral heritage, the Union is founded on the indivisible, universal values of human dignity, freedom, equality and solidarity. It is based on the principles of democracy and the rule of law. It places the individual at the heart of its activities by establishing the citizenship of the Union and by creating an area of freedom, security and justice. Detroit has experienced the second most dramatic population decline of any major city of the last century. Since it peaked in population during the 1950 census, the city has lost 61% of its population. With the loss of this tax base, the city itself had to declare bankruptcy. Tens of thousands of houses now sit abandoned throughout the city, upwards of 30,000 by one 2012 estimate. While St. Louis is well known for cool landmarks like the Gateway Arch, Union Station and the St. Louis Zoo, a few seedy statistics give this American heartland city a bad rap. St. Louis has earned the distinction of having the most cosmetic surgeons, obesity and violence, per capita, than any other U.S. city. Reno has actually been on a steady decline for years as tourists choose to spend their time in Las Vegas or California's Indian casinos. Since it can't compete with the other huge Nevada city, it's decided to reinvent itself. Now, it's attempting to become a bowling mecca. Will this attempt succeed in reinventing Reno's reputation? Only time will tell. One of the biggest problems with Cleveland is the unemployment rate, which is nearly double the country's average at 6.1%. The good news is that it's currently dropping, but there's a history of unemployment in Cleveland spiking dramatically. As people find jobs, the economy may pick up and turn it from somewhere miserable to somewhere people flock to. Once a major manufacturing hub for companies such as General Electric and RCA, Camden is now one of the most dangerous cities in America. Camden actually had one of the worst crime rates in the entire nation in 2012 because it was 6.6 times higher than the national average. There's plenty to see, like the Memphis Zoo, great museums and Graceland, home of Elvis Presley, but this Mississippi River city has a high crime reputation. The worst part about this is that people that have lived in Memphis for decades are beginning to leave the bustling city. Many claim that this has been an issue for more than just the last 10 years, as the issues really date back to the 90s. Stockton has been trying to crawl out of debt by boosting the economy, but it has home of the Ivy League's Yale University, headquarters of the Knights of Columbus, and birthplace of President George Bush. New Haven is part of the greater New York metropolitan area. Despite so much going for it, this city has consistently ranked high on dangerous cities lists. Once a booming auto industry town, the municipal water supply in Flint is pure poison. Cost-cutting measures leading to off-the-charts lead content has landed the city in a state of emergency. Since the 1960s, crime has been a major issue for San Francisco's neighbor across the bay. A consistently dwindling police force and a traditionally poor relationship between law enforcement and the community make it difficult for Oakland to curb the violence in this picturesque waterfront city. Forbes actually ranked it first nationwide in violent robberies. There is so much to love about the Windy City, but its epidemic of violence is hard to ignore. In 2016, Chicago saw 762 homicides, the highest rate in 19 years. Contributing factors include drug activity and years of gang factions that operate like well-oiled machines. Agro-centric Modesto is the home of Gallo Family Winery and birthplace of Star Wars director George Lucas. While there's much to do around this Central Valley city, its reputation, fraught with foreclosures, sky-high unemployment rates, and street gangs, can give some visitors pause. The Connecticut city of Hartford has a reputation for being unsafe, however, this unsavory assessment seems to apply to problematic pockets rather than the whole metropolis. Downtown is relatively safe, while tourists are advised against venturing into the area known as North End. In northeastern Florida, Jacksonville boasts the largest urban park system in the United States, but its reputation isn't quite a picnic. Heavily populated Jayville isn't all bad, but it's wise to steer clear of the Northwest Quadrant and Arlington Expressway, where mostly gang-on-gang violence is a concern. Unfortunately for Jackson, the unemployment rate in the state's capital is higher than for the state as a whole. What's more, the poverty rate for Jackson is worse than the state percentage. Boil water alerts are also a common occurrence. That doesn't add up to a reputation for a city that takes care of its citizens. Las Vegas? How could it be? Las Vegas has had a major issue with human trafficking, not something you want your city known for. Underage trafficking is becoming such a problem that huge training sessions are being held to teach people how to protect themselves. Since 1994, the city has recovered 2,229 victims, but that pales in comparison to the number that goes missing every year. Las Vegas? How could it be? Las Vegas has had a major issue with human trafficking, not something Oso, Washington, is technically a census-designated place, ACA. A small town, north of Seattle. The town made infamous headlines in 2014 as the site of a large mudslide that killed 43 residents. Even worse, subsequent investigations into geological surveys by environmental experts found it was previously known to be prone to mudslides. Like many areas in the Rust Belt of the Midwestern United States, Steubenville has seen a consistent population decline since a peak in the 1940s. Since that time, the area has lost 52% of its residents, who have left to seek better job prospects elsewhere. Couple that with the city's reputation for political corruption, particularly involving the police force, and a national Heatling High School rape case in 2012, Steubenville hasn't seen its fair share of positive news in quite some time. Of the 382 most populous metropolitan statistical areas in the United States, Johnstown experienced the third largest decline in population between 2010 and 2016. Just over 6% of residents have sought job opportunities elsewhere. In fact, the city hasn't seen its population increase since before the 1930 census. Farmington has the dubious distinction of being the metropolitan area in the U.S. to have experienced the greatest population loss in the past 6 years. Since 2010, the city has lost around 11.5% of its people. A large chemical spill at the nearby Halliburton facility in 2006 and multiple civil rights investigations, particularly a 2005 report noting grievances against American Indians, probably helped spur the decline. As the capital of West Virginia, there's perhaps no better symbol of the decline of a coal-based economy than Charleston. While the town is pleasant enough, job prospects have dwindled and the population has declined from a high of 85,800 in 1960 to around 49,000 today. If there's some good news for Baltimore, it's that while the city's population has been on the decline since the 1960s, the suburbs are absorbing those who are moving. The city has lost 1% of people in the past 5 years, while the metropolitan area has gained 3%. That being said, Baltimore has had some unsavory headlines, particularly around race relations and its police force, in recent years. Unfortunately for Pine Bluff, it has the distinction of seeing the largest decrease in population since 2010 of any U.S. metropolitan area. From 2010 to 2017, the city lost 9.27% of its permanent residents. Like many other Rust Belt cities, Gary has lost population as national trends see people moving further south and west. This isn't a recent phenomenon, however. Gary has continuously lost population since the 1960s. It's down 57% from its peak. Buffalo has been a victim of population loss as well. Buffalo has done much to revitalize its formerly manufacturing-heavy economy. Even with all that work, however, the unemployment rate remains at 5.6%. That number comes in much higher than the state of New York as a whole, 4.5%. Wilmington, Delaware's unemployment rate is currently at 5.1%. Granted, that is low, but still not as low as the state of Delaware's 4.0%. Compared to Wilmington, North Carolina's 3.6%, it almost seems super high. Nearly 24% of the population of Delaware's largest city is below the poverty level. The poverty rate for Albany, Georgia, is 25.5%. Compare that to a 15.4% poverty rate for the state of Georgia as a whole, and things aren't looking too great for the city. Since 2010, the area has lost just under 5% of its population. In good news, Milwaukee is rebounding from a population loss. In bad news, the city remains one of the most segregated in the country, based on maps of racial distribution of where people live. In Homestead, nearly 32% of the population lives below the poverty line. Moreover, that poverty disproportionately affects Hispanic residents, which make up the bulk of the city's residents. Conscious of its spiritual and moral heritage, the Union is founded on the indivisible, universal values of human dignity, freedom, equality and solidarity. It is based on the principles of democracy and the rule of law. It places the individual at the heart of its activities by establishing the citizenship of the Union and by creating an area of freedom, security and justice. Texarkana is a small town on the border of Arkansas and Texas. Other than being known for a horrible smell thanks to a paper mill, this tiny town was made infamous when 5 people were murdered in a span of 3 months. These murders later became the inspiration for a movie called The Town That Dreaded Sundown. In addition to a decreasing population, Portsmouth has the highest unemployment rate in Virginia. The statewide unemployment is 4.0%, but Portsmouth is at a whopping 6.1%, making it one of the hardest cities to get a job at in all of Virginia. Tacoma is another city on this list with a higher unemployment rate than the state average, sitting at 6.6% compared to Washington's 5.4%. This city is also one of the most dangerous in Washington, with 947 violent crimes for every 100,000 people in 2016. Tucson has a reputation for being the most dangerous city in Arizona, with 800 violent crimes committed for every 100,000 people, which is almost double the state average. Poverty levels are also incredibly high in Tucson. Almost a quarter of Tucson's residents live below the poverty line, making it the city with the highest poverty rate in the state. Parkersburg is one of the poorest cities in the whole country, with a poverty rate of 25.3% compared to the national rate of 14%. This city also has one of the worst hospital systems and sees 16% of patients being readmitted to hospitals within 30 days of their first discharge. Laramie has a poverty rate that is almost double the national average, sitting at a hefty 28.8%. Not only is the poverty rate depressing, but housing costs to live in this city are also incredibly high. Average housing costs are more than 5 times the median income for Laramie, which is much higher than the national housing affordability ratio of 3:1. Not only is Little Rock the most dangerous city in Arkansas, but it's also one of the most dangerous in the United States. In 2016, there were 1,533 violent crimes committed for every 100,000 people, more than double the state and national averages. There's also a higher risk of natural disasters such as tornadoes. Residents of Pueblo face difficulty finding a job because the city's unemployment rate is 5.3% and is higher than the state average. Pueblo's poverty rate also sits at 24.2%, making it the highest city in Colorado for poverty levels. The crime rate is also abysmal, with 1,081 violent crimes committed in 2016 alone. Louisville is hands down the most dangerous city in Kentucky. With 750 violent crimes committed for every 100,000 people, Louisville's rate is more than triple the state average. It also has the highest unemployment rate in the state and a whopping 15.7% poverty rate. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to subscribe.